start the video without me putting my dancing shoes on, okay? You always
It's
do that. You
so
surprise
it's
me. Ah! Like that! See? Now you got me all flustered. Wow,
right.
yeah. It's time to start the show anyway. Oh, you're always on time. Here we go. Oh!
Okay, I didn't want to startle you. I'm sorry that you had to dance without your dancing shoes today, but that's also a sight to enjoy. So, good morning, Timothy. Good morning to everybody in Clubhouse now, and to our audiences in YouTube and on LinkedIn as well. It's a pleasure to be with you on this rainy morning once again. I hope that in the corner of the world where you are, it is much better. The weather is much better and you can see some sunshine there. Well, the past week has been really busy and exciting in many different senses of the word. And I'm sure that Timothy is going to let us know about that excitement in detail and also what we can expect in the next maybe 1 or 2 or 3 weeks and even next year. So there are implications of what is going on at the moment, but I'll leave all of that talk to Timothy. So, Timothy, the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being with us again.
Thank you very much, Maya, and good morning, everybody here in Tokyo and around the world. Today is January 21st, 2024. This is our third episode for this new year, Maya. And the audience just continues to grow, right?
Mhm.
This is our third
Yes,
one? Right.
it is our
So,
third one for this year, yes.
okay, 154, actually,
Mhm.
154 in an unbroken pattern of weekly briefings for you, the audience, on what's going on in Japanese politics. When we first initiated this, you remember, Maya, I was curious whether we had something to fill in every week. I've got to come on and talk about what's going on in Japanese politics, Japanese culture and economy. Do I have enough there? And boy, it's been very exciting. Today is no different. Today, in fact, is jam packed. In fact, we don't have enough time to get through all of the things. There's a lot going on with the economy, with law, with the police, with Johnny's Gym Show, with the Fujitsu. But we've got to get to the real heart of the matter, which is what's going on with Mr. Kishida and the faction system. So let me get right into that. As you might know or remember, if you're watching this briefing every week, Mr. Kishida set up a blue ribbon panel as soon as January opened up. And he said this blue ribbon panel will consist of 38 key members of the LDP, not just independent members who will give us a unbiased view of what we should be doing, but also these key LDP members in the factions. So Mr. Motegi will be there, of course. I'll be there. I'll be the chair of the blue ribbon panel. Thank you, Maya. Um, and we will come up with some plan. So they had their first meeting 2 weeks ago. They had their second meeting on Monday of this last week. And the diet starts on Friday of the week that's coming up in 6 days, 5 days. The diet will start. The emperor will cross the moat in his motorcade. He will come up the stairs, the circular driveway to the parliament. He will walk up the carpeted stairway, maybe have a cup of tea in his glorious, appointed, unbelievably magnificent sitting room, and then move into the throne. Japan has a throne, in fact, that is sitting in the alcove of the upper house members' chamber. And all of the members of the parliament, the upper house and the lower house, 740 members or so, will pack in there. The emperor will open the diet session as he is constitutionally mandated to do. And then the prime minister will get up there and make something like a State of the Union speech, but that's all that will be achieved on Friday. Mr. Kishida has promised the public that he will also have the Blue Ribbon panel issue the report of what they have decided to do in response to this kickback scandal, this political funding, and he will do that on Thursday. So Thursday will be very active, and there's a lot of build up to that and a lot of things that have been going on over the last couple of days. So typically this briefing, as you might know, covers the last week of issues. So North Korea fired a rocket last Sunday. It landed outside of Japan's exclusive economic zone. It was another test missile. That happened on Sunday. The prime minister visited Noto Peninsula. He had his blue schmuck on, and he's maybe even a hard hat to show the public that he is involved and engaged in the reconstruction of the Noto Peninsula and viewing just the devastation. So we all heard about the earthquake during Christmas or during the New Year, but the devastation as the first responders get out there is just it just continues to be more and more massive. But the prime minister went there, and we talk about what's going on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, all the way through the week. So you really need to keep in tune with this. I produce a synopsis, as probably you know. If you don't, please visit Maya's Japan Expert Insights or my webpage, Langley Esquire, or either of us on LinkedIn, to follow what the points are that we've talked about and the questions that were asked at the end of the briefing. And in fact, the questions are really the meat of this briefing. I try and tee it up and bring everybody up to speed. But the questions and answers are really, they take up as much time as the briefing, actually a little bit more. But in any event, the prime minister announced this blue ribbon panel will now address this issue. So the public prosecutors, you really, I mean, I know you have your job to do, but this is an internal matter that we will handle. That's the storyline. And so that explains why this last week there was a lot of action going on. There are 6 members of the Abe faction who have been identified as like culprits. Culprits is not the right term, but the key figures in the Abe administration. This includes the committee that is in charge of guiding this faction following the death of Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, the assassination of him, and a couple of other key members. So in every faction, they have what you would call a secretary general who is in charge of managing the faction, in particular the finances. And Mr. Kishida, up until 2 weeks ago, was the faction head of his faction, and he resigned as the political mess began to really morph. He resigned, so his political faction is leaderless, kind of. He is in name only, not the leader, but I think Mr. Hayashi, the foreign minister, is probably filling in for him a little bit, but I think Mr. Kishida is still in charge. In any event, of the people that have been kind of fingered now, it is this group within the Abe faction, plus the people who have been counting the money, the secretary generals of the various factions. So when the story first broke, there are 6 factions in the LDP. The report that broke out of Kobe University was that there are 5 of these factions that are skimming funds and then kicking back to some of the prominent members and not reporting it as a tax, as an income to them and as revenue to the political factions. So that's what this whole brouhaha is about. And the people who were in charge of counting the money in the political factions, Mr. Nikai is somewhat responsible, but they really blame the accountant and the politician who is in charge of the secretary general of that political faction. So these are the individuals. There are probably 8 or 9 of them that have been identified by the public prosecutor's office, and each of them are under very tight scrutiny. On Tuesday, the public prosecutors, scratching their head, reported, it's awful difficult for us to prove collusion between these politicians and the accountants of these factions. So these politicians, although we know that they've received money, and the ones that received a lot of money, like over 30 million yen over the period, we're going to look at them a little bit more carefully. But everybody else, I think it's probably the fault of the guy who was counting the money, who's not a politician, who's a hired accountant in the political faction. And Mr. Kishida said on Thursday, there was some misdirection, administrative mistakes, but I don't think it's really a deep scandal that really impacts everybody. But just to make sure, just to keep the public comfortable about what we're doing in politics, I'm going to suggest that we disband the faction. So that's how this story came out. And the guilty now are the people who were counting the money, responsible for that. This is mostly professional accountants within the factions, not politicians. The politician who was mostly overseeing that, but not the faction head, and then the faction head maybe secondarily. And the public prosecutor's office has come out and said, look, we're not going to publicly prosecute, but we might have an independent prosecution for some of these people. It does not involve an arrest, and it involves a something less serious than a court case and results in a fine. So that looks like the path that we're going to, and we will find out pretty conclusively on Thursday. Thursday's the announcement of the Blue Ribbon Panel. They might have another meeting this week in preparation of the Prime Minister coming to the public and telling them what the findings of the Blue Ribbon Panel are, but I think we can pretty much guess that, and you can understand from the tone of my delivery about where I think it's going. But it looks like on Thursday, he will make this announcement. He has kind of bit the bullet maybe, or taken the bull by the horn, and stepped out first on Thursday and announced we will disband Kochikai, which is the faction that he leads. The oldest political faction started in 1950, I believe. Produced 5 prime ministers, including the current one. And he's decided somewhat independently. He did include some other people within the political faction, but he didn't include Kamikawa, the foreign minister. He didn't include Hayashi, the chief cabinet secretary. Both of them expressed a little bit of surprise at the movement of the prime minister, and a lot of people in the faction expressed displeasure and surprise that the prime minister would make such a move independent of including them. But there's a lot going on. It's happening awful quick. He was fingered, as you know, earlier last week or later last week by the public prosecutors of his role. And he did revise the funds of his political faction. He increased it by a pretty large amount. I forget what it was. I've got the notes here. He increased it by I forget what the number is. It'll come up as I go through the rest of my notes. He increased the funding, so it's kind of like full disclosure now. I looked at the books, and now I realize it. And this happened on Thursday, the same day that he disbanded the faction. He took the first step. It somewhat surprised the Abe faction and the Nikai faction, because they also are participating in this 38-member Blue Ribbon Panel. And so this is an LDP internal decision, how they're going to handle it. And Mr. Suga is on the leadership there, and he says, you should really take aggressive action here. The public is not going to condone this kind of action. It involves money and politics. The recruit scandal 20 years ago also almost destroyed the LDP. We had to revise a lot of things. We shouldn't have a repeat on that. We really need to take decisive action. And the prime minister, to his credit, did that just that day, and made a pretty decisive action. When we first heard the news, we weren't sure. I remember Maya and I and Dan Harada were discussing this, and it's a big gamble for him going out first and leading the charge. And it could be, but probably it wasn't, because he's never going to do something unless he knows what's going to happen afterwards. But it could have been that he makes the decision to disband his faction and nobody else does. And that leaves all of his members out in the cold. They don't have a faction anymore. And then there are 5 other political factions that do. He announced the Abe faction and the Nikai faction very reluctantly also announced the disbanding of their political factions. and the crickets from the Aso faction and from the Motegi faction is a little bit deafening. I think they might hold their guns there and continue to maintain their political factions. Their claim is that political factions serve a very decisive and important role in training and educating upcoming Diet members, and also having the war chest to make the political process more fluid. And as long as it's transparent, that's okay. Political factions, when they exist, can hold fundraising parties. When there is no political faction, for Mr. Kishida's faction, they can't hold these huge parties under the guise of political funds for their faction or for their members. Now it has to go to individuals. So probably there will still be big blockbuster kind of Benkyokai and Hagimaskai and book publishing parties that will occur, but they can't, under the tax regulations, collect political funds and distribute them and hoard them. So that's going to be a little bit of a challenge, and I think you're going to see that this is a dynamic change for Japanese politics. Post-war, MacArthur helped write the Japanese Constitution. They implemented revisions to the labor law and to many of the ministries, and then they let the Japanese promulgate the revised Constitution, and then they stepped out. And the political factions did not start there. Initially, there were 6 political parties, the Communist Party being very strong at that particular time, the Socialist Party very strong. There was a Liberal Party and there was a Democratic Party. And in the first election, there was just so much confusion that under the help of the American government, the 3-letter agency in particular, helped revise the political distribution, and they joined the Liberal Party and the Democratic Party, and the LDP was born then. And from the beginning, since it started with 2 political parties and they joined together, immediately 2 factions started. The party that was formerly the Liberal Party had its faction within the LDP, and the party that was the Democratic Party within the LDP had its own faction its own faction, and then it just grew from there, and seemed to be very helpful and a vehicle for collecting funds. This fund collection didn't really take off until towards the Kakue Tanaka administration, and then it really started building upstream. But over the last 20 years, the factions have really been building up. And this political scandal that we're experiencing now started about 20 years ago, initiated by the Abe faction, not under Mr. Abe, under probably Mr. Mori, it was called the Mori faction at that time. So initially it was the Fukuda faction. It was the Fukuda faction when I was working in Japanese politics. I was a member of the staff of Taro Nakayama, who was in the Fukuda faction, very close to Mr. Fukuda. Mr. Fukuda actually pulled him out of the Doctors Association to run for the upper house. So there was a tight connection there. And I met Mr. Fukuda many, many times. It was his faction. And since that time, it transferred a couple of times. And many times it's still referred to as the former Fukuda faction. So prominent was Mr. Fukuda at that point in time. But in any event, there are 6 factions that are going on now. 3 of them have disbanded, and we don't know actually when it will be disbanded. Mr. Kishida said, I'm going to close the office, we're going to sell the furniture, and we're just going to disband, and whatever money's left in the safe that has been reported, we will take care of that somehow. The dates for that have not been announced, but you can bet your dollar that on Thursday it will be very open, aggressive. He will be smiling, he will be contrite, he will be repentant, and he will take leadership. And boy, is he having a heyday just beating up the Abe faction in doing this, and also the Nikai faction. So overall, yes, for a while there, it looked like it was just the Abe faction getting beat up so much, but that's because the public prosecutors were really after Abe in the representation of who Mr. Abe was after his death, because of all of the political scandals that they weren't able to really score hits on. So let's see what my notes tell me here. Yes, the treasurer for Mr. Kishida's faction, Kazuo Sasaki, resigned last month, and he was indicted on Friday. He's not a member of the political group. He's not a Diet member. He is their treasurer, and he was indicted on Friday. And Kishida lamented that, and he said it was just basically administrative oversight. This scheme that has been going on for within the Kishida faction. Maybe it's been going on 10 years, maybe a little bit longer, maybe not 20 years. But in any event, the statute of limitations only looks back 5 years. So he's contrite about that. He actually, when the treasurer was indicted, Mr. Kishida reported to the Internal Affairs Ministry, and you'll remember that the Internal Affairs Ministry was headed by an Abe faction Diet member until Mr. Kishida cleaned house, and then he inserted an independent member of the parliament who was ushered in by Mr. Motegi, or under the graces of Mr. Motegi, to take over the Internal Affairs Ministry, which is in charge of all of this political funds evaluation. So Mr. Kishida sent an emissary to the Internal Affairs Ministry, and he said, we looked at our books and we found that we have underreported, and so here's the report for us: 30 million over a 3-year period, and here's the report for that. He didn't bring 30 million with him. He just reported and fessed up. That's what the Kishida administration did. The Abe faction is still embroiled in turmoil. And in fact, as you might recall, of the formerly 99 members, it is now 98, perhaps 97 members. One of the members was indicted this last week as well. Will probably give up his badge. So let's say it's 98 members of the Abe faction. The vast majority of them are younger members that have been in the Diet 2 elections or less. And that comprises about, maybe 30% of the Abe faction. And they formed a team under the leadership of Tatsuo Fukuda, the grandson of Mr. Fukuda, who we just talked about earlier. And they formed a group, and they went to the main leadership of the Abe faction, and they said, look, you guys should disband. This is really hurting us, and it looks like we're not going to be able to win an election with this hanging over our head. And you guys, you fat cats, are the ones that have been getting most of the money anyway. And it looks like that rang true, because the very next day the Abe faction disbanded. The Abe faction said, this group of leaders, 6 leaders that are kind of guiding the Abe faction, are led by Mr. Shinoyoya, Ryu Shionoya. And he said that, gosh, I think we were misled by the administrators of the faction, and we're going to come clean on that. And in fact, you younger members who are coming to us now, this group of maybe 30, 35 younger Diet members, also complained, we were told, we were intimidated by hush tactics. Keep it quiet, don't report on it. You, of course, are not pocketing any of the money. These other guys are, but you're supposed to keep your mouth shut about it. And Mr. Shinoyoya reportedly said, I am personally unaware of these hush tactics, these practices that you're complaining of, but in any event, we're going to follow your recommendation, and please hold your horses. We're going to do something. And then the next day they reported that. So once again, since the public prosecutors have decided, there are more than 100 public prosecutors chasing this thing down. Somebody threw some cold water on it recently because they have now publicly said, it's awful hard to prove a conspiracy between the leaders of the faction who are Diet members and the guys who are counting the money, the administrators, the paid professionals, the accountants. Maybe these guys did it all on their own. Maybe they made up this scheme to give this kickback, and the Diet members were just totally unaware that money was appearing in their pockets. But that was that's the public prosecutor's kind of escape clause now. And I think what has happened is that there's been a lot of horse trading in the background. Mr. Kishida, who administers basically the Internal Affairs Ministry, has said, look, instead of you going back and going hard at these individual members of the factions, I will show contrition and I will disband the Abe faction. We'll get those guys out. You can charge the gang there that has pocketed most of the money with a summary indictment, which does not involve a trial and does not involve prison time or an arrest. And then this is what I will do as a consequence of that. I think that's what's happened. And the public prosecutors have been pushing a very hard game, because by Friday of this week, the public prosecutors can no longer arrest members of the parliament. 150 days, they have parliamentary immunity. So if the public prosecutors are going to move, they need to move before Friday. And I think we've already seen the whites of their eyes. They're not going to move. I think the deal has been cut. And the rest of this week is, I don't know if there will be a lot more legal action there. I think there will be some heat on the Aso faction and the Motegi faction. But Mr. Aso is, you can see how upset he is with this whole mess. He hasn't been implicated that much, and neither has Mr. Motegi. They would like to keep it that way. So maybe that's part of the horse trading. Mr. Kishida, you can remain prime minister, but God damn it, you keep us out of this mess. We're going to keep our factions. You take the hit because it's under your leadership, and your approval ratings are already in the toilet. But you take the fall for that. Blame it on these other people, sweep it under the rug, and then let's move forward, moving into the new diet session. It sounds like the plausible explanation to me. For the Nikai faction, so initially the report was it's the Abe faction and the Nikai faction who are mostly guilty of this scheme. And in fact, the Abe faction has more than 300 million yen over a 3-year period that has been reported. And the Nikai faction has more than 200 million. And the fellow who was arrested last week was one of the people in the Abe faction who somehow collected the most amount of kickbacks. And the reason why he was arrested, so out of everything that's happened here, only one person has been arrested. There was another arrest, but it was related to a bribery scheme unrelated to the Abe kickbacks. So, in fact, that might be the reduction of the Abe faction from 99 to 97. I haven't heard that he's resigned from the. Actually, he was kicked out of the Abe faction, but I don't know about the Mr. Ikeda. In any event, the people who pocketed it and the individual who was arrested just this last week, the reason was because not only did they collect more money than other Diet members, for example, Mr. Nishimura, formerly the METI minister, very influential and on the group of leadership within the Abe faction, he didn't really benefit that much from pocketing the money. He's guilty as charged. But there are other people that you don't hear much about who were pocketing a lot of money mysteriously. And in any event, he was seen packaging up documents, moving them out of his Diet office, sequestering them away from his house and his office. And that's why the public prosecutors jumped on him and arrested him and his secretary and 4 other secretaries. 2 of those have been indicted without arrest, and the other 3 have been indicted and arrested. So there's a lot of hell to pay there. In the Nikai faction, In other words, there was 200 million basically that were accounted as unaccounted for in the 5-year period, 2018 to 2023, when this story first broke. The accountant was indicted on Friday. Mr. Nikai was on television the other day, and he's not speaking. I think he's 83 years old and not in such great health. So he had his spokesman speaking beside him with actually tears in his eyes, apologizing for what has gone on, and that they were going to close down the Nikai faction. Let me see. This new group, there was yet another group, not just the Abe faction, but another new group, independent members of the parliament, who formed a group, currently 19 members, under somewhat of an affiliation with Mr. Ishiba and with Mr. Suga, and they made a demand to this new LDP group about how they should be treated and how things should be moving forward. So there's still a lot to be played there. The Abe faction executives will escape prosecution, as I've said before, perhaps a summary indictment for those 5 or 6. And finally, the LDP is considering, who knows if it will come through, maybe it's just a trial balloon, it's considering disciplinary action towards these LDP members, predominantly the Abe faction members, but not just them, with disciplinary action, which could result in a censure, or they can't do political fundraising. It could come as far as, we're kicking you out of the LDP. Nobody's really saying that, but I think they're just kind of floating that out because they want to tell people, we're really serious about this and we're considering disciplinary action too. But when it comes to Friday, I think the story will change considerably. There's plenty more to talk about, and I think I'd like to just leave it here for that political topic, and would just push it off to the Q&A, because I know there are a lot of people who are more interested in it and more knowledgeable. So let me just move on. There's a lot of other things going on. I mentioned North Korea fired a new ICBM, a very fast-tracked, maneuverable ICBM, solid rocket propulsion. So they're continuing this advance in technology. Much of it suspected to be at the guidance of the Russians. There's a lot of trade going on there now. They've found rockets and artillery in Ukraine, being used in Ukraine, that are emanating from North Korea. The North Koreans have also, as a protest to these, there was a 3-day exercise between Japan, the United States, and South Korea just this last week. It included the participation of the Carl Vinson, the aircraft carrier from the United States. They had exercises there, and the North Koreans are really mad. And so they announced the testing of their nuclear-equipped drone, underwater drone. So there's been suspicions of them developing this new device. Apparently, there were tests that were done this last week. There are also some stories coming out that the Russians are gifting to the North Koreans a submarine, a high-powered advanced submarine. The North Koreans, obviously, they have their own diesel submarines as well, but this ratcheting up just never seems to diminish, and it just continues to get hotter and hotter. In 2023, North Korea has fired 5 ICBM, 25 ballistic missiles, and 3 satellite launches. The ratcheting up is going so hot that the South Korean ambassador to the UN went to the Security Council this last week and demanded that they do something about the escalation of tensions in the peninsula. In fact, North Korea has our great leader, Kim Jong-un, has dictated that the Constitution of North Korea will be revised. The Constitution currently says we will work towards unification with our brothers to the south and try and mend fences and not annihilate each other. and he's revised the Constitution. He's ordered the revision of the Constitution that takes that out and says they are the enemy. We need to promote and protect ourselves and defeat the enemy, guided by the United States. And so the Constitution is actually changing there. The no-fly zones have already dissipated. It is very close to a state of conflict there already. And the South Korea ambassador insisted that the UN take action. As you might remember, the Security Council sanctioned North Korea for their nuclear tests in 2006. I think that was maybe during the Clinton administration. And over the 10 years since then, they've increasingly had sanctions. But the last sanctions approved by the Security Council were in 2017, because North Korea is sponsored by China and by Russia. Both of those countries hold veto powers within the Security Council. So since 2017, there's been no sanctions. The United States, under the auspices of South Korea and Japan as well, have pushed for sanctions to stop the trade in technology and the enhancement of their missile and trajectory technology, and they've gotten nowhere with that. And so it's just continues to get even more escalated. Once again, the state visit of Mr. Kishida to Washington, D.C. There hasn't been a state visit since 2015. You might not even remember that. That was under Obama, and that was Mr. Abe on a state visit. So a state visit is a big deal. It's bigger than a visit to Washington on your way back from Brussels or any one of these trips. A state visit is a very big deal. And the United States and Japan has agreed that they will hold this state visit on April 10th. The Prime Minister was hoping it would be in mid-March, when he portrayed the invitation that he received from Joe Biden the last time they met. Sure, let's get together, let's have a state visit. The Prime Minister asked if we could meet sometime in March. So that tells you that the Prime Minister is expecting March to be particularly hot for him. They passed the budget on April 1st, and I think April 10th is maybe a little bit late for his liking, but it is what it is. He'll take what he can get. Biden, on the other hand, has a State of the Union. There is a Super Tuesday also in March, I think March 5th, and his State of the Union on March 7th. So I think President Biden needs to conserve his energy, and his schedule won't allow a state visit until April 10th. It's a long time for the Prime Minister to wait, but you're going to hear more and more news about this. And just to position what's going on in real time, with the win of the Iowa caucus by former President Trump, the Japanese are becoming increasingly nervous. What happens if Trump becomes president again? Because the last time Mr. Trump was president, everything was in question. He even pushed Mr. Abe down into the sand trap. What's going to happen between relations, Japan and the United States at that point in time if Mr. Trump becomes president? So they're starting to get really nervous. Mr. Aso visited the United States, Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago. We reported on that and what he was doing, what he was saying, and how much he was promoting the current prime minister. Not very much. But Kamikawa also visited last week she was on a trip, maybe a 6 or 7 nation trip. She's in the Indian Ocean this week. She is really on a tear. But she will be instrumental in setting up the state visit. So you're going to hear a lot more about that. And this fight between Joe Biden and Donald Trump is going to heat up. And I think people who are in the public eye, even people like us, like not Tokyo on Fire, but Japan Politics 101, we will increasingly be called to make a statement about where you stand. Is it Bush or is it Trump or is it Biden? And the lines are going to be really severely drawn. And then at the end, when the election is finished, those who are on the losing side are going to have hell to pay. So it's going to be a very tense, very fractious political year coming up, and even the Japanese are getting more and more nervous about that. They need to, they need to place their bets, and they need to be careful about it, because some people say there's no way that Biden can win in this kind of a race. And then there are other people who say, hell no, never again are we going to have Trump. So it's very delicate for the Japanese with regard to trade in particular, but also defense issues and military armament. They signed the documents this last week for the purchase of the 400 Tomahawk missiles. We've talked about that endlessly. The signing was at the U.S. Embassy with the Minister of Defense. So a lot going on there. With the Noto Peninsula disaster, the earthquake and the tsunami that happened there, people are beginning to scratch their heads. This is not going to be a surprise to many people. They're scratching their heads and they're saying, we need more people up here to repair the roads and the electricity and the water mains and things like that. And we don't have the workers to do that. But there are lots of workers at the expo, working on the expo in Osaka. It's 500 days away, and those workers could be productively used in the disaster reconstruction. So now there's a discussion going on about taking these workers, relieving these workers from the work on the expo and dedicating them to Noto Peninsula. And I think it's beginning to take a little bit of traction. That is going to diminish significantly the Ishin party, who was promoting the expo to be in Osaka one more time. I think it's been 20 years, maybe 50 years. How many years has it been since the Osaka expo, which really boosted the region then? And now, Osaka wants to repeat that. And Ishin dominates Osaka politics. They have they have the majority of members in the Osaka Prefectural Assembly. They have the governorship in the prefecture, and the mayor is also from Ishin. So Ishin is, they kicked all of the LDP members out, exclusively. The next contiguous prefecture is also being dominated. They've got a governor from Ishin. So the fact that they're going to potentially lose all of the luster of this expo is a pretty daunting feature. And I think, we have continued to keep an eye on it. And I know there are a lot of people that are interested in it. So I just want to report to you, 55 years since Osaka had their expo. It's a big deal. Let me see. Did you know that Japan joined the space race and landed a device on the moon on Saturday night? They landed a very light device called the Moon Sniper, 700 kilograms. Most of the time when countries are launching these products, they weigh several tons. They land softly on the moon. They have experimentation and exploration going on there. This device it was intended to prove pinpoint accuracy and to measure certain things in a specific region of the moon. Japan now joins China, the United States, Russia, and India in landing a vehicle on the moon. Unfortunately, when it landed, the solar panels did not deploy as they were designed to do. It's got battery power. The battery power will run for a couple of days, but without the solar panels, the batteries will die out soon. But in any event, even if the solar panels did deploy, because of the conditions on the moon, they weren't expected to last more than a couple of days anyway. So it's an experiment by JAXA, the Japan rocket industry, to prove their capabilities. You know, they've had some problems with the H3 rocket. They didn't use the H3 for this launch, and this launch was in September, I think September 9th or so. So it's been traveling up there. It took 2 satellites with it. Another satellite was launched to measure X-rays from and plasma from distant stars. It's in geocentric orbit with the United States. And then this other one, the Moon Sniper, took off for the moon. And just recently, you might remember that it was Russia and India that were in the space race. Russia didn't land their crash successfully. India did. They are now in the South Pole, the first country to land in the South Pole. So this is a big deal for Japan. It's unfortunate that the power did not result. The power did not come on as designed. The other thing that I just want to touch on, there are a couple of other things that I just want to touch on because otherwise it's just too. I mean, there are just other things like Fujitsu, the Fujitsu scandal in Britain with the postal services. This is a huge scandal. You'll remember with Johnny's Gym Show, this huge scandal with the sexual exploitation by the owner of Johnny's Gym Show was basically ignored by NHK, by all of the PR companies, and Johnny's Gym Show was feeding the entertainment industry with boy bands, with entertainment, that sort of thing, for 25 years, 30 years. And then a documentary came out of Britain that exposed this thing, and then 3 days later it broke in Japan, and then it became this huge expose, this huge scandal. Similarly, the same thing happened with Fujitsu's scandal in the UK. It's been going on for 15 years. Fujitsu supplied software to run the post office accounting, and it turned out that they had a glitch in that. And as a consequence of the glitch, the way that the system is set up and the way the law is set up, if the accounting for this particular district, this post office district that you are in charge of, you are the postmaster general of this district, if there is an accounting discrepancy, you are supposed to provide the money for that. If it's, the accounting is $5 short, you're supposed to come up with that $5 so that you meet it. You're supposed to do that. And the accounting glitch had just, hundreds and hundreds of people who were in that position guilty of skimming. And many people lost their jobs. There are a couple of suicides, and nobody really investigated how it happened and who is the culprit. And they finally found out that it was Fujitsu. So there's a huge scandal that's going on there. Similarly, there's another scandal that's going on with Daihatsu. We've reported on that. Daihatsu is a subsidiary of Toyota Motor Companies, basically building the small engine vehicles, the trucks that are very popular throughout Asia. They're not pickup trucks, but they're like working trucks. And they have been fudging on the airbag reports. And it's come to light that 3 models in particular, they weren't fudging it. They were absolutely fraudulently changing the data that was produced by these airbags. In some cases, they had timers on it so that the airbags would deploy irrelevant to the impact of the vehicle. So the Japanese government has shut down 3 lines of vehicles coming out of Daihatsu. They're still under a no production. It's January 21 right now. They're not allowed to, the plants are not even running now. They're not even producing vehicles. This is a huge hit, not just to the company and to Toyota and to the 800 feeder companies that rely on supplying Daihatsu, but also to the economy in general. Having, with Japan automobile having such a huge impact on the overall economy, this is pretty bad news. At the same time, though, the Nikkei hit a 35-year high over these last 2 weeks. So we've been reporting on that. It's been very volatile. A lot of people are making money on the stock market there. A lot of foreign money is coming in. The yen took a bit of a hit. It is now at 148. So it was at 144, 143, maybe 2 weeks ago. And now it's kind of bounced back up. It's 148. That's not good news for importers. It's great for exporters. But as the yen falls, Japan also does. And it might have escaped your attention, but Japan is no longer the 3rd largest economy in the world. It slipped this last week to number 4. Germany slipped into number 3. So the number one economy is the United States, then China, Germany, now Japan. And as economists predict, watching these sort of things, Japan's fall will be rather precipitous. It will go from 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 relatively quickly. There are a couple of people here in the briefing that are more attuned to this than I am. But within the next year or so, Japan's fall is going to be pretty dramatic. It will settle down after maybe 3 or 4 years, but there are a lot of countries that will come in to fill in the top 10 economies of the world. Japan's economy is based on the population. The population is declining at an alarming rate. It's become a big issue. We've talked about it last week. It's in the press this week because the press is watching this briefing too. So there's a lot more to be coming out of that. Who knows what's going to happen with the yen, with the Japanese economy, with the stock market, but with what's going on in the United States as well, and the emergence of the Biden Trump election, a lot is going on in addition to what's going on in Japanese politics. I'm going to wrap it up here. I've gone awful long, Maya. I apologize for that. Let me say, I've gone on maybe 40 minutes. So if we can roll into Q&A. Thank you very much, Maya, for hosting this platform so that we can talk about this. 154 episodes. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you to everybody, yes, to second your words, and then to you, Timothy, because you have been here every Sunday morning, right? Yes.
I'm afraid not to be.
Well, okay. Anyway, so thank you. And before we continue, I just wanted to say that we have a great viewership now, a lot of viewers on YouTube. And I want to say to everybody there, thanks for joining us on YouTube as well, because the audience on YouTube is growing as well as it is on LinkedIn. So we appreciate your being with us on Sunday morning. It is really something that keeps us going, right? So thank you. All right. Oh, and by the way, we would appreciate you leaving a mark that you have watched the video there by hitting like or subscribing or just leaving a comment
and
there.
money.
Question. Okay. Yes, we haven't set that up yet. All right. Yes. Well, Timothy, we have quite a few questions, and I'll start with one of the questions which was shared during the week, actually on YouTube. It is from Nicholas Hughes. And well, it is probably a little bit late for the answer to it, but I'll read it to you anyway.
Okay.
So the question is, if the Abe faction fractures, what will happen to the balance of power within the LDP factions? Will the other factions rise in power by absorbing the ex-Abe faction members?
Yeah.
Or will the new factions or correlations of factions arise? What are
Yeah,
your
that's Nick, that's a great question. And that
Mhm.
is the whole reason why people are so interested in this. In post-war Japanese political history, the LDP has been the gorilla in the room. And to have this dissolve in front of us, like pouring a spoonful of sugar into some warm water, how does it impact the rest of the environment here? And the court is still out on that. I imagine, and this is why Mr. Motegi and Mr. Aso are being reluctant to dissolve theirs, because it has tremendous power. Politics is about numbers, and politics is also about money. You cannot have an efficiently running democracy without money that makes this go forward. You have to have money, and that's why lobbyists are important, and that's why transparency is important, and that's why political funding that is reported and that is above the boards is important, because money and politics, it's tied together. It's inescapable. And if it's retarded, then everything kind of goes under the table. So what is going to happen now is anybody's guess. I don't think there will be a real shakeout for a couple of months. Even while the Diet is in session, it might be a little bit more difficult because they're passing laws, they're passing the budget. There'll be some political fighting and battle lines drawn as a result of the 150-day session. But until the Diet reaches its recess, then then you'll be able to see how this thing is panning out. But I think what's going to happen is that there will be actions taken, maybe even pronouncements about revisions to the political funding law to placate the population. So the population is somewhat demure. It's not, I mean, it criticizes the politicians because everybody loves to talk about the weather and about politics. But until there's an election, you really can't calibrate things. And so the only election we've got coming up, and it's unlikely that the prime minister will call for an election, is on April 26th, when the by-election happens on Sunday to fill the seat of the Shimane Prefecture lower house seat that was made vacant by the death of Mr. Hosoda and by the rejection of the Tokyo seat for the lower house member in the Abe faction who had to resign his badge. There could be some others. I suspect there will be maybe 4 or 5 more coming up, but every day's a new day. And with regard to how the former factions are going to act, yeah, I think you're still going to find these groups. So there's a faction which is not really, it's also a Nidantai. It's a unaffiliated, it's not a kabushiki gaisha, it's not a corporate entity, but you will find other groups like that. You can form groups like that in Japanese law. The distribution of liabilities and responsibilities for decisions is pretty firmly dictated in the law. But I think that's what you're going to find. You're going to find political groupings that are not quite factions. And these political groupings will circle and kind of the centrifugal force of powerful members, or for example, Tatsuo Fukuda, whose grandfather was prime minister and leader of the creator of the Fukuda faction. Individuals like that will continue to, attract like moths to a light bulb. People who want to feed off of the power and the prestige that you have, and working in conjunction with other members, like-minded members, always produces a quicker and maybe a better result, but at least a quicker, more reliable result than members, working independently. So it remains to be seen. But clearly, with the LDP, maybe 30% now are independent members. The rest are affiliated with factions. With the disbanding of the Abe faction, the Fukuda, the Kishida faction, and the Nikai faction, that number will grow to 70%, 65%. I haven't done the calculation, but that kind of number. So what happens with the LDP? Maybe, and I think the prime minister has run the calculus, maybe the president of the LDP, his power and his prestige becomes enormously greater. And that's why Mr. Kishida decided that he is the president of the LDP, in addition to being the prime minister.
Well, that's thank you for that, Timothy, because there is a follow-up to that question by a different viewer now from Raicho Diankov on LinkedIn. Raicho, thank you very much for your question. And then he says, adding to that question, which you just answered, not involving Mr. Aso and Mr. Motegi in the disbandment process, could it lead to a new leader of the LDP, okay, and a contest to a new PM, Prime Minister? So
who asked the question?
Raicho Diankov. Oh, my fellow Bulgarian, yes.
Okay, it's a great question. We're not going to know the answer until the LDP election in October of this year.
Mm-hmm.
So the Kishida administration, his term ends September, October of this year. And I think in order to secure his position, he's not going to do anything. He's not going to close down the House. He's going to fight off any no confidence motion, even though his approval rating is in maybe the teens. I'm waiting for a poll to come up that tells us more descriptively where he particularly stands. he's come up strong a little bit. After watching the show last week, he went to Noto Peninsula. He put on the blue schmuck, and I think that generated, it was, 2 weeks late, you could say, but he did take a delegation there. He's been very visible on TV and, making a strong stand, and I'm going to disband the Kishida faction, this faction that has been going on for 50 years and has produced, 5 prime ministers. I'm going to dissolve it. Yeah, I think that gains him a little bit of credibility and taking the leadership role and announcing before the Abe faction. Certainly, the Abe faction needed to fall on its sword, but I don't know what the idiomatic phrase is, but he leapt into the chamber first and fired his shot before the Abe faction and before the Nikai faction. So taking that lead does expose yourself to criticism, but it also shows leadership and determination. So I think it might reflect a little bit on his approval rating. But in any event, yeah, the LDP members will select the prime minister. If there was a vote today, Mr. Kishida would not be prime minister, clearly. So he wants to avoid that.
He wants to avoid that, but I cannot help thinking, and we have discussed this before with you, Timothy, that everybody seems to have underestimated Mr. Kishida. And it is, well, we knew that people thought that he was indecisive, that, he was a kind of ignoring the decision makers in other factions, the leaders of other factions, when there was something that he had to move upon, right? And then suddenly he's once again in the spotlight, and he's the savior of the whole LDP. So saving the LDP from corruption, the factions there, and so on. No comment from you?
No. Yeah, sometimes he looks really clever and the man on the moment. But if you've watched him in his televised appearances, it is so well choreographed. It is so artificial. The questions that are asked to him, his pretending to leave the microphone and then being called back by a question. Yes, well, yes, of course that concerns me, and looking just really dapper. He came in on the first set of he's on just almost every day this week with the blue schmuck that shows that he's working on Noto reconstruction. He's there, and he just went into the room and changed his suit. But it's all for public consumption. It's all for atmospherics and performance, and you can't avoid seeing that. I mean, the way he looks, his countenance, the answers that are given to him, and the crispy response that he gives. Yeah, this is. But in the prime minister's office, the official office of the prime minister, it's 5 floors underground. It's 4 floors above the ground. There are more than 500 people that are working there for the chief cabinet secretary and for the cabinet office and for the prime minister. And they do have a team there that tells him what to say and how to dress and what's going to happen, how we're going to roll this thing out, how to deal with the press. So, I mean, it's just like in any major economy, you're going to have that. You just hope it's not as obvious. And he's a politician. He's not an actor. But yeah, I don't know if he's the man of the moment, but it is an opportunity for him to actually gamble and take some leadership. I mean, one of the reasons we've talked about this endlessly, one of the reasons why he had to be indecisive is because you've got the 99 member or the 100 member Abe faction that he has to contend with. And so as a result, the leadership of the LDP and the cabinet really relied on him and Motegi and Aso in the absence of somebody from the Abe faction. But they still had to consider, when we decide this, is this going to make them revolt? Is it going to make them give us even more trouble? And I think he's had to deal with that through his entire administration. So you can close your eyes and imagine how he must feel, this opportunity for him to claw back at them and to scratch their eyes out after all of this stuff that he's had to put up with, and how he's had to be perceived as indecisive because of these jerks in the Abe faction. So, yeah, payback is hell.
Okay, thank you for that, the comments. And we have, yes, a few more questions actually about the factions. So I will go through them as well because we are on the topic right now. And yes, so one of them is from Paul Ashton on LinkedIn. And there
Hey,
is,
Paul.
hello, Paul, thank you for the question. And then there is another one which is related to that same topic in Clubhouse from Hiroko-san. So I'm going to actually go through these two questions first. So
Okay.
Paul says first, so, okay, just a moment. Okay, he says, maybe could you please talk a little about why the ASO faction hasn't folded? Does it have anything to do with his wife, perhaps?
What's the story with his wife?
Oh, I am not aware of that. So maybe, Paul, if you're watching us, you can give us hints about that. And maybe, yes, we can talk about it a little bit later. And then Hiroko-san's comment or question anyway, yes, in Clubhouse is, I learned that Mr. Aso was pretty much upset about disbanding the factions. But some of the members from former Abe or other factions, do you think that they would join Mr. Aso or Motegi faction?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes?
Um, as a protective measure, yes. Being in a faction is more, I think, it's more desirable than not being in a faction, because especially during elections, you have help from the other people in your faction and you're helping them too. And plus, in a faction, you can have political and economic support. They can give you money for more posters or for more administrative staff, that sort of thing. And I mean, everything is about elections. I mean, you like your constituents and you like the policies that you're working on, but every member of the parliament is solely dedicated to becoming reelected. In this society, I think, as most people know, if you fall out of your job and you have to reconstruct yourself as a salaryman, or you've lost your job, I mean, it is the most devastating thing that can happen to you. And for a politician, that devastation runs even deeper, because the way you become a politician is you convince thousands and thousands of people to vote for you. So it's because of your family, because of your pedigree, because of your wife. I don't know what Paul is getting at about Aso's wife, but yes, the wives also bring a certain amount of chutzpah to the party. And so when you lose your election, you know, nobody really, people avoid you. And what are you going to do? You're not going to sell cars or sell insurance. Even teaching at a university is just, it's so gauche. You know, why do you want to do that? You were sitting on top of the world. So everything is dedicated to becoming reelected. So you will gamble your ethics, you will do everything in order to become reelected. And it's helpful when you have a faction that you're assigned to, that you belong to. I mean, there is comfort in numbers. So politics is nothing if not numbers. Um, so I don't know if Paul responded to you. I'm curious about the
Not
implication.
yet. Yes, I'll be, yes, looking, checking for his
But let's
response.
get back to the initial question that he asked. You know, is Mr. Aso, he's upset, and what is he going to do about that? I think, yeah, he's really mad. And if you think about Japanese politics, or if you think about politics in general, the most defining key of Japanese politics is money, right? How money flows, how money is used, how it's calculated, how it's reported. And Mr. Aso was the longest serving Minister of Finance. And when he became Vice Prime Minister, he resigned as the Minister of Finance, but he put Mr. Suzuki in. Mr. Suzuki's dad was formerly Prime Minister. Mr. Suzuki belongs to Mr. Aso's faction, and Mr. Suzuki is now Minister of Finance. So they're not going to let that puppy go. And probably Mr. Aso, having, you know, I mean, it's in his blood how the money is run, how the country is run. He is a very powerful, very influential person, and just because goddamn Kishida couldn't keep things under control, and Abe, and oh my God, now I have to take charge of this, and I can't be prime minister. I don't want to be prime minister, but I still have to keep this thing together. And this gravy train, it's I want my guy to be the next prime minister. So he's taking a bit of a backseat um, uh, position on this. He's not prominently being reported as being investigated by the public prosecutors. Nobody has been indicted. In fact, you hardly ever hear anything being said about the Aso faction or about the accountant with Aso faction or how much money the Aso faction has been collecting. It is a little bit curious, but similarly with Mr. Motegi too. So this triumvirate of Motegi, Aso, and Kishida, this is what's running the company now, and you've got this third leg with Mr. Kishida taking bold moves that these two don't quite agree with. So there could be a cat fight very soon coming up. But I think the three of them have understood that the staying together is better than fighting right now. So Mr. Motegi desperately wants to become prime minister the next time. He feels like it's his turn. He deserves it. He's eaten a lot of crap already. He's got the third, well, he's got the second largest faction now. When you're counting factions, there are only three. There's the Aso faction, there's a Motegi faction, there's a Moriyama faction, and that's 30% or less of the entire LDP. Will that 30% collectively be able to elect a new prime minister? Maybe. So maybe they'll accelerate the decision to kick him out of the LDP and therefore as prime minister, or to keep him as LDP president and elect a prime minister who's not the LDP president. Lots of calculations.
Yes, and lots to just wait and see.
Yeah.
Okay, then there is a question from Hiroaki on YouTube. So his question is, when will the LDP reorganize and expand Kochikai and make it Grand Kochikai or Dai Kochikai? What is your take on this?
Yeah, that's a good question. Who is that?
That is Hiroaki.
Hiroaki, yes. When are you going to become prime minister, Hiroaki? You should
Right.
become prime minister.
Yes.
You've always got great insight and great intel on what's going on there. And I think the only reason why you ask me these questions politely is because you already know the answer. But yeah, a reconstruction of Koichikai, which is the Kishida faction, it is not yet disbanded. It is still existing. The offices are still being run and manned. The prime minister just said he's going to disband it. He didn't give a timeline for it. I don't think, but I could be wrong, when he makes his pronouncement, the blue ribbon panel pronouncement on Thursday of this week, he could say and give a timeline for it and be a little bit more descriptive. It's not his style, so I don't know. It is possible that, yes, we take a hiatus and then they regroup once again. Yeah, it's a famous political organization, and it deserves to exist. It's just that they've been caught with their hands in the cookie jar, and penance needs to be made. So I think in the current diet session coming up, or in the diet session coming up, there will be maybe some tweaks to the Political Funds Act or the law. There might be some revisions about how factions can be treated and handled. But I think factions, it's just a part of Japanese, there are factions inside any company. There are factions in university schools. You've always got your kohai, senpai. It just matches the culture here. And you can see that even in light of this decision to disband the factions, immediately sprung up this group that went and appealed to the Abe faction, this group of younger members of the parliament who went to the Abe faction leadership and said, we, as a group, we demand you do this, and you guys are screwing up our lives too. So they spontaneously formed a group. And secondly, even with the Nikai faction, there spontaneously grew up a group of independent non-affiliated with a faction members who went to the Blue Ribbon panel and said, this is what you should be doing. So it just springs up, and numbers mean something, and particularly in this environment. So uh, I don't know yet, Hiroaki, but it is yeah, it's a head scratcher. But without a doubt, what's going on in Japanese politics now is epical. It is changing the tone of Japanese politics, and we will be remembering it for years to come, and it will have a lasting impact. So I'm very grateful for having this opportunity to talk about it with you guys and to hear your input too, because it's the story's not finished.
Right. Okay. So Boas answered to your question and also mine. I was trying to draw a comment on Aso family relationship with the imperial family in Japan, perhaps pointing to a reason for the faction not being held across the coals. Is the faction kept squeaky clean due to the external relationship burdens or above reproach? Also being the brother-in-law of a member of the imperial family, and probably that has something to do with the current developments.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if the imperial family is involved at all, you're not going to hear about that. Just in closed doors and in whispered comments, they might express their displeasure. But Koichikai is, I'm sorry, the Aso faction is not squeaky clean. They have been implicated too, but maybe what Paul is suggesting is, as a consequence of that, there has been other forces brought to bear on keeping Mr. Aso protected and his faction from the bruises and the smears that are being directed mostly at Mr. Abe's faction, Mr. Nikai's faction, and yeah, I think. Yeah, initially there was curiosity about the Kishida faction, but I think he's taken the big hit now. I think as much suffering as he's going to have, he's already having it now. Nobody's going to be arrested. Nobody's going to be indicted. They might be indictments, but there will be fees or fines to be paid. They'll throw the accountant under the bus. Certainly, Mr. Kishida, certainly Mr. Aso is not going to suffer any personal repercussions as a consequence of these minor distractions that the accountants made in having this 20-year scheme going unfolded without our knowledge and authorization. Let's see how that sounds to the voting public.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And I'm moving now once again back to Clubhouse. So just a moment. Since we're once again on the faction topic, I'm going to read Ren's
Ren from Philadelphia.
Yes, question and comment, and then I'm moving also to the question of Rumiko. So, well, first, Ren, about Hayashi Yoshimasa. So, the politician in Kishida faction, whom you, Timothy, once mentioned as someone ambitious and could become the next prime minister.
Sure.
So, the question is, what is your latest assessment of his political future? Is the current situation working for or against him and his premiership goal?
Okay, that's a great question. I have my own top list of potential candidates for the prime ministers. He rides high. Konotara rides high. Kamikawa is beginning to rise. The reason why I like Kamikawa is you might not have noticed this, but Japan Airlines appointed a new CEO. She'll take office on April 1st, as everybody kind of does in rotation. She became the first female to run JAL. That's a pretty big deal. And there was another female that was announced just this last week that I should have mentioned a little bit more prominently. The Japan Communist Party has elected as their new leader also a female, a very a real firecracker too, to be their leader. It's interesting when you talk about the Japan Communist Party, and forgive me, Ren, for just a little bit of a diversion. The Japan Communist Party, the members don't elect their leader. Their leader is kind of appointed. It's not run in a democratic fashion. A couple of years ago, some of the members got together. They wrote a book that suggested that the membership or the leadership of the Japan Communist Party should be elected by a vote of the members, and these guys were immediately kicked out of the party. So they elect their leaders in a different fashion. But the Japanese Communist Party, it's small, but it's very effective. They have a lot of high level, very smart, very ethically clean people. It's just that their policies, their philosophy is based on the Communist Manifesto with a bunch of tweaks. It's not the Chinese communists, it's not the Russian communists. It's a unique blend, a Japanese blend. But in any event, let me see. Tomoko Tamura was appointed as the new chair. Mr. Shi, everybody knows who Shi is because Kazuo Shi is the chair of the Central Committee. He's not quite stepping down. He's made it clear that he's still in the fold, but we're going to have a woman now in the national leadership because our image is a little bit fudgy and it's not run as most political parties are, and we're losing members. In 1994, we had 360 members, and today we have 250. We need to do something about that. That's not the problem with JAL. JAL has got a different issue, but it implicates Ms. Kamikawa as a potentially good candidate because this kind of rise of women in leadership positions is really beginning to take hold. Getting back to Hayashi, my assessment of Hayashi has not changed. I like him immensely. I think he would make a great prime minister, and I think he's got all the attributes to that. The reason why I might hold my bets back a little bit is because factional politics dictates who is going to become the new prime minister. And now we have this faction disruption, and who knows how we're going to be able to elect the new prime minister. So in typical LDP fashion, the person who gets the most votes becomes the president of the LDP. So first you've got that hurdle to cross. If you have the largest political faction, even if it's only 30%, and you can have all 30% of those vote for your candidate to become LDP president because everybody else wants their guy to vote. So you're going to have 30% vote for one guy and 20% vote for another guy. The decision is already basically made. If you have the largest political faction, your guy will become LDP president. LDP president almost invariably becomes the prime minister. So without the political factions, it's really hard to dictate. And the reason why you join a political faction is because even if your guy doesn't become prime minister, horse trading is you're going to vote for the guy that does become prime minister. As a consequence of that, you'll get 2 or 3 cabinet portfolios, Minister of State, Secretary General, Foreign Minister, something like that, within your faction. So if you're a faction member and one of your guys is a minister, what's going on in that ministry begins to trickle down too. And people who are in your constituency will come to you and say, listen, I've got a problem. And the guy that's in your faction, he's the minister. So can you kind of make a good word for me? And it does work. That's how things operate, or that's how they used to operate. So it remains to be seen how the premier, the president of the LDP, will now be. It will be a vote, but if it's Mr. Aso or Mr. Motegi, they're the only ones with substantial factions. Then you can pretty much. Yeah, I think it would be pretty hard for them not to get the LDP presidency and thus the premiership. Mr. Aso, the largest faction holder right now, he is deputy prime minister already. So maybe the fix is already in, but it's a great question, and thank you for asking.
Well, and thank you for answering. Yuka, welcome up on stage. Just if you let me only go to Rumiko's question first. So Rumiko,
Yeah, fine.
yes.
How
Well,
many of these?
oh no, just one.
Okay.
Okay, for the moment.
Just teasing.
Well, Rumiko, please take care. Yes, I know that you're teasing, and that's a good thing. But I hope Rumiko is appreciating your teasing. And Rumiko, please take care, okay, and get well soon. So Rumiko's question is, so could you please comment about the interviews of Makiko Tanaka, the daughter of Kakuei Tanaka? She, in an article online, she was explaining something related to political funds and how things are going on here in general. So do you have information about this, Timothy, or shall we look into it later?
I didn't read that interview. Where was that, in Bunshun? Where was that, Lumiko?
Let's see.
I didn't see the interview,
Maybe.
but you know,
Okay.
she's a prominent figure right now because the house burned down, right?
Right.
So Makiko Tanaka was foreign minister. Her father was Kakue Tanaka, and she was a firebrand. She was really an effective LDP leader, and she was married to also I forget what ministry he held, but he also was a member of the parliament. They were burning incense in the new year at the Tanaka estate in Mejido, and yeah, something happened and the whole structure burned down, and that was just a couple of days ago. So the fact that she was interviewed, I think it's probably since or maybe as a consequence of that fire, because her name value is very high now, for her comment about political funds. Yeah, she's not in the diet anymore, and she has a voice, and I think she could effectively say something about what she didn't like and how she didn't benefit from it and how dirty it was, and she could say a lot of things. But I will search for that interview and read it and be prepared next week to maybe comment on it if it's relevant.
Right. Okay, so it apparently was
Timothy.
in my niche.
Yes, here we go.
Thank you. Excuse me, just wanted to drop the little information. That article is from Online Mainichi, and it must be a subscriber to go through the full thing, and I'm not a Mainichi subscriber. So just to give you a bit of information about Tanaka Makiko-san no koto. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you, Romy. Yes, thank you.
I'm
Okay.
curious if it included a recent photo of her. So,
Yes, they have, and you got it, because she's out of the political thing, so now she can tell anything basically. Yep. So I think the Mainichi got her to get the more inside thing, because the nationals or including residents interested in what's going on. So
great. Well,
thank you.
I'm sure it's interesting reading. I will follow up on that. Rumiko, thank you very much.
Thank you. And Yuka, 大変お待たせしました. I'm sorry for keeping you waiting.
Good luck. I didn't have much to say, as usual.
Okay.
Anyway. Just I have like one brief comment and one very quick question. So the comment about the new female jail president, I think she's not only female. She used to be a CA, cabin attendant.
Yeah, and then that's how she started, 1984.
Yeah, and so they say maybe that's sort of that's implied. But anyway, they said maybe that's the first president who can appreciate what kind CAs go through on a daily basis. So I thought that's a very interesting. But as usual, everybody's think a lot of challenges to her. But we see though, I think it's a very interesting and a great development. So my quick question about this Japanese the scandals, any scandals, like those entertainment industry or politics. why so many of them are come from Bunshin? Why Bunshin got that lead on that? Is that the only publication that who are sort of willing to just, take a heat? It's what, yeah, why them?
Let me answer that in a couple of different ways. First of all, let me get back to the JAL CEO, and I hope Lori is in the audience, Maya, because the response to the question about Bunshin, really, she has a lot to say about that too. But getting back to JAL, they did say that we need to address this complete lack of women involvement in the executive leaderships. And Japan has been criticized roundly in the G20 for having so few people. So I think what they said with tongue in cheek is, even though she's not that qualified, we must accommodate the government's insistence that if you are a joint stock company that's listed in the Nikkei, 30% of your leadership must be women by the year 2030. That's in 6 years. And I think this was one of the responses to that. So you have to have these role models. You have to have people that are identified. And they even said, this is part of that. So maybe it doesn't make her feel that good, because maybe just because she was an attendant, they don't call them stewardesses anymore, a flight attendant.
They call it CA. I don't know why. It's not the flight attendant. They call it CA.
A CA, a cabin attendant.
Cabin attendant. Yeah.
I guess.
Okay.
It seems unique to Japan. But anyway, okay. Wait. So can I sort of use? Did you say specific to her? They said no.
They didn't say specific to her,
They
but
say?
I'm not catching you very clearly.
We're losing you from time to time.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, actually, no. I think So I was just asking. I didn't read that about her. I didn't know that she was not qualified. But anyway,
no, I'm not saying that anybody said she wasn't qualified. And in fact, we all know, everybody that's on the program knows that to become a JAL cabin attendant or a stewardess when they first began this thing, I mean, you were the cream of the crop. You were the top of the line. They sent cars to pick you up and bring you to the airport. You were treated like royalty. And so you had to be smart. You had to be well-dressed. You had to be poised. You worked your ass off, actually. And so it's not a diminution of what she's achieved by having been a cabin attendant. But I think in the press release and in the announcement that her elevation into the chief executive office was also in response to the dictates of the Japanese government that 30% of the executive team needs to be women, and we're doing our best, and appointing her is representative of our efforts to do this across the board and across the country or the company. And so it's something like that. But I think a lot of people will snicker and say, yeah, she's not going to be as good as the guys, and they can't fight like guys can, and we drink and we smoke and we chum it up, and a woman can never do that. I don't know, but it is important to point out that it's happening. It's not happening just at JAL or just in the Communist Party or just within the LDP, where the foreign minister, who happens to be a female and probably number 2 in the former Kishida cabinet, is being prominently evaluated as a candidate to become prime minister and replace Mr. Kishida. I think the prospects of that rise every day, and particularly as a consequence of Mr. Kishida saying no more factions, because she's foreign minister. So if she's not number 2 or 3 in the Kishida faction, what are her chances now? I think they've increased rather than diminished. So let's see what happens. But the other question was about Bunshin, and a great question there. Bunshin is like the bad kid in the class. So everybody else follows the rules, and they clean the floors and they do what the teacher says. But you've always got this kid in the back seat, making jokes and poking girls and pulling their pigtails and stuff like that. So that's bunshun. In the publication world, that's bunshun. And bunshun serves a very vital role because the press has basically been preempted. It is controlled by the state. It is controlled. Mr. Abe was famous about, coalescing what the story is, making sure NHK is a mouthpiece for the government, even though it's supposed to be completely independent. And it's not really, it sounds like a criticism. I hope it's just an observation. We have the same problem in the United States and in several countries. Somebody made a comment about the Thai royalty and 30 years in prison, right? He was a journalist, in fact. That was announced just this last week too, 30 years for that. So it happens in other countries too, and you would hope that it doesn't happen in democracies, but it does. And here in Japan, bunshun is that one that's going to kick over the stones and write about these stories. And every once in a while, they get the story a little bit wrong and they get sued for it. But more often than not, they have fingers, that reach, people love to talk. And if you give them a little bit of money or a little bit of alcohol, people love to complain about, what their boss is doing and what he's doing in the back office and what's happening to them. People love to talk about that. And maybe they're not talking directly to bunshun. Maybe they're talking to their wife, and their wife is talking to bunshun, and they're making a little bit of money on the side. These stories generate a lot of wealth. Bunshun has a massive readership. Every Thursday, it goes on sale in all of the kiosks and in the convenience stores. So it's a big deal, and it plays a vital role because they talk about things that nobody else will talk about.
I mean, the current kickback issue, this also comes from bunshun, right? Or am I wrong? No? Oh, okay.
No. The current kickback story came from a professor in Kobe University. And it's still a little bit mysterious how he was able to get inside data on what's going on with the political funds of each of the factions. But he got the data, he did the research, he got the public information that was available, and he formed a criminal complaint. And when this criminal complaint was filed, the Akahata, the Japanese Communist Party, has a newspaper that it produces every day. It's called the Akahata, the Red Flag. And most of the funding the vast majority of funding for the Japan Communist Party comes from sales of the Akahata. And it's a very smooth, sweet publication about what's going on in politics, what's going on in Japanese industry, what they're criticizing, what they're proposing, the Akahata. And the Akahata picked that up, and then it really became a story. So bunshun was not at the forefront there. And sometimes when bunshun is not at the forefront, then they just ignore it. If they can't grab it, if they're not first to talk about it, then they'll leave it to Shincho or to some other publication. But they want to be the first to kick over the stone and look at all the spiders, running hither and nither. And, they want to write about that. They want to be the one that kicks that story over.
Mm.
Well, I hate to be a spider found by them. Okay, but anyway, thank you.
No, definitely. You do not want to be in the crosshairs of bunshun. It is a career ending. It is a scary thing because once they got their fingers in you, they're not going to let it go. And all you're going to have is pain and damage. Just being mentioned in an article. It might be nice. It's not just about scandal. It's about a lot of different things too. And so being mentioned in bunshun is not always a bad thing, but when it's a negative thing and they are on the attack, yeah, it's a bad thing. And once again, before we wrap this up, talking about scandal. So I've frequently said that scandal is a component of Japanese politics. It is an activant that initiates change. It is a very central part of understanding Japanese politics. And Maya is hosting Igor, who wrote a book. I think he wrote a book on Scandal in Japan. Is that right, Maya?
Scandal in Japan is his book. Yes, he published it last year. And he's going to be with us this Wednesday morning at 8 o'clock in Clubhouse and as a live stream as well on LinkedIn. So you can join us and listen to him, his discoveries, and him talking about the, let's say, the patterns and the cultural connotations behind scandal
Where
here.
is he from?
He's from the Czech Republic, but
So,
he lived and worked here in Japan for more than 10 years, I believe.
but
And he
I don't
also,
think he's here in Japan.
no, he's not in Japan. So he's going to stay up late for our podcast on Wednesday.
Okay.
He's now in Prague. He
Well,
will be
I was
joining from.
suggesting that because I don't think he's here on the program. I think he picks it up on YouTube as a lot of
Yes,
our audience does. But
does,
he will
yes,
be here on Wednesday, right?
yes, yes,
I'm
Wednesday
looking
morning.
forward to hearing what he has to say.
Oh, I'm very much looking forward to that too. Yes,
Thank
thank
you
you
for
too.
arranging that, by the way.
Yes.
But
Maya,
can I? And I know. I'm sorry, Rumiko-san. Can I just throw one thing though? You said scandal is part of the Japanese politics, but scandal is not only with the Japanese politics, right? It's just everywhere.
Yes.
Can I get that comment from you, or you don't agree? There's more scandals in Japanese politics more than any other countries.
No, it's everywhere. It's if the royal family is involved in, or not in Japan. I mean, there's never anything about a scandal in the royal family here, but in other countries, yes. If it's anything touching on the royal family, it's very scandalous. But in other countries, the royal family is somewhat more prominent. They're out in the public eye much more. But scandal, it's an active event in every country. It's just that sometimes it gets you killed. In most democracies, hopefully it doesn't get you killed, but yeah, there are forces at play that want to diminish the impact of this reporting or this diminution of your power, because if you're diminished, then I become more powerful. So there's always that at play. And yeah, it's a nasty world. It's politics can be cutthroat, and like I said earlier, the most important thing, not just for a Japanese politician, but I think that there's a heightened sense of duty and responsibility here in Japan. If you stop being a member of parliament because you lost your election, that's a heavy toll. In other countries, there are avenues for you to make money, for you to have another livelihood. You return to the profession of law, or insurance salesman, or whatever, real estate broker. But here in Japan, I think those options are far more limited. And so the devastation of losing your position is far greater. So people will go to even further extents to avoid being involved in a controversy, even if they deserve being involved in it. So therefore, it's not this, in many instances, it's like in the Hunter Biden case. It's not the crime that was committed, it's the cover-up that was exercised to bury the original sin. So it's the cover-up that kind of begins to make things going. And I think the same can be said, even maybe more strongly, in the United States. What's going on in the publication world there, with the newspapers and the television stations. People have just lost all faith, and so they go to other sources, individual sources, to find their information and make their own decisions, rather than to be spoon-fed by the major news corporations. So yeah, there's a lot going on, and I think in many instances there are scandals that are going on that are just covered up. You never hear about them. They just become a conspiracy theory. So don't pay any attention to that. And by the way, we have something else of great news and great importance that you should be paying attention to. That's not so much the flavor that you get here in Japan. I think that's a lot of the flavor that you get in the United States. But yeah, I don't want to paint Japan as being scandal prone. It happens everywhere. It's just the dynamic, the way it happens. It's significantly different here. And I think Igor will give us a real taste of that in his presentation.
Yes. And Rumiko, sorry for keeping you waiting.
Sorry for interrupting you.
That's okay. Just wanted to mention, Timothy, you know that Tanaka Makiko-san did the no kishakaiken. What do you say in English? Like police?
Press
public
conference.
yes, press conferences in the Diet Cabinet on, I think, last month, 8th of December 2023. And there is a YouTube full channel too saying that nationals are not stupid, something like that. Then, as you know, 2 weeks ago, roughly, her, father's old house in Bunkyoku was burnt, and 27 fire cars coming to distinguish the fire or something like that. So I don't know what is going on, but all those like small things as you said, like we know it. We know it. It's just like which portion we're gonna pay attention to. So luckily Tanaka Makiko-san is still alive, and I just tried to Google up her articles. It's everywhere. I mean, Nikkei and FC, whatever, like everywhere. And nowadays we can do the recording, so yeah, like anywhere we can find it. But unfortunately, the sources are only in Japanese for this particular portion. Not like the what was it? Fujitsu, publishing only. I got to know it from BBC because I get to know all those things from every different sources. That's why I get to know those things, including you, Timothy. Your lovely resources too. So some of the non-familiar Japanese people are not aware of this burning the house thing, or some people are not aware of like Fujitsu making a big deal in the harassing BBC or British people and stuff like that. So we have to collectively understand, and that was something I wanted to comment. And thank you very much.
No, great insight, and thanks for the support and the a little bit more of the analysis. As a foreign observer, I need to watch what I say, but you're Japanese, and I think your assessment is really finely tuned because you've spent time in several countries, and I'm always impressed with your language ability and your keen mind on these issues. So yeah, thanks for tuning in, and thanks for being a part of the briefings.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you again. So I shared the title of the book of Igor Prusa. His book is titled Scandal in Japan, and it is available, I believe, on Amazon as well. So you can have a look at it, read it even before the podcast or after we talk with him, and you gain a little bit more insights what the book is about.
I lost your video. Are you brushing your hair? Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Anyway, so sorry for keeping you on the screen all the time. So I know, but people are definitely happy to see you, so don't worry about that. Okay, and well, it is already 8 minutes past 10 o'clock, and I would like to to say goodbye to everybody for today, and allow people to go about their day. And not having to multitask or be stuck to the screen of their smartphones or computers. So thank you very much, Timothy. Really, it was a great session once again. To everybody who has already been with us or who was with us last week, you know that we're preparing a webinar about the current political events, and that webinar is going to be to take place on February the 1st. The webinar will be delivered by Timothy Langley and Dan Harada, with insights once again about what is going on and possible implications and what we can expect in the near and not so near futures as well. So that will be once again February the 1st. That is Thursday.
It's a Thursday.
A Thursday, yes, from 12 o'clock lunchtime. So that is midday. We hope that you can join it. Of course, it will be live streamed first, and then it will be available on YouTube, maybe a day or two later. So
that's a 3-day weekend too, by the way.
Yes. Well, it's not going to be 3-day long. I mean, the webinar itself. So if people want to enjoy the weekend, they can still do that. Well, that's all for the moment. And of course, please stay with us. And again, I'm going to say it instead of Timothy today. If you have watched this far, our session, hit like or hit subscribe or leave us a comment, give us a question, connect with us on LinkedIn so that we can actually, yes, we can connect with you and we can talk with you even more directly. Well, that's all for today. Thanks very much. And Timothy, well, I'm going to have this one now on stage.
Okay.
Okay, so
Another feature.
another feature just now. Yes. All right. Thanks again. Have a great weekend and well, take care. It's cold and we hope that
Thanks, everybody.
yes, stay well.
Thanks, Maya.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Timothy.
Thank you.